The desert sun burned mercilessly over the barren lands of the American frontier. Heat shimmered on the horizon, the air dry and heavy with silence, except for the low cries of scavenging vultures circling above. And beneath that vast, unforgiving sky, a young woman stood tied to a weathered mesquite tree. Her wrists were raw from the coarse rope, her ankles bound so tightly that blood seeped into the sand. Her name was Ayoka, a 21-year-old Comanche girl whose spirit had never known fear, until now. She had been taken captive by a rival tribe, stripped of freedom, and left as prey for the wild beasts that prowled when dusk fell. Coyotes, wolves, even mountain lions stalked this land, and the men who tied her here had done so with cruel delight. To them, she was nothing more than bait for the desert's teeth. But Ayoka's eyes, fierce and unyielding, refused to bow to despair. She thought of her people, her mother's wisdom, her father's stories of courage. A warrior's spirit cannot be chained, her father once told her by the campfire. Even when the body is bound, the heart must stand free. And so, as the scorching sun baked her skin and the shadows of death crept closer, she prayed, not for rescue, but for the strength to face her fate with honor. Yet destiny has a way of surprising the brave. Miles away, Caleb Turner, a young cowboy with a weathered hat and a rifle slung across his shoulder, rode slowly across the desert. He was no hero, at least not in his own eyes. He carried his own scars, his own guilt. A year ago, he had failed to save his younger brother from a gang of outlaws, and that failure haunted him like a ghost. Since then, he had wandered from town to town, working ranches by day and drinking alone by night, searching for something, perhaps redemption, perhaps peace. As his horse trotted across the parched land, Caleb heard it. A sound sharp enough to cut through silence, the faint, desperate cry of a human voice. He reined in his horse, listening. There it was again, a cry, broken and weak. His instincts screamed caution. Bandits sometimes used cries to lure men into ambushes. But then, he thought of his brother. Of the regret that never left him. He could not, would not, ignore the sound of someone in need again. Caleb urged his horse forward, and soon the sight hit him like a hammer, a young woman bound to a tree, her dark hair tangled, her lips cracked, her proud eyes glaring at him even as her body trembled. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, strangers in a world that offered little kindness. Then, the silence split with the sound of movement. In the tall grass nearby, a coyote crept closer, its yellow eyes locked on the helpless girl. Caleb didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle, exhaled slowly, and pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the canyon, scattering birds into the sky. The coyote dropped lifeless, and Ayoka closed her eyes, relief flooding her face. Caleb leapt from his horse and cut the ropes with his knife, his hands firm yet gentle. "You're safe now," he murmured. But Ayoka, though weak, lifted her chin and met his gaze. "Safe," she whispered. "The desert is never safe." And she was right. For rescue was only the beginning. Caleb gave her water from his canteen, watching her drink with the hunger of the near-dead. Slowly, strength returned to her voice. She told him her name, her tribe, the betrayal that led to her capture. Envy between tribes, hatred that stretched generations, it had all led to her being left here, a cruel sentence written in blood and sand. Caleb listened, and something stirred in him. He saw in her eyes the same fire he once saw in his brother, the will to survive against impossible odds. And he knew, deep in his soul, that helping this girl was not just chance. It was destiny giving him another chance to do what he failed to do before, save a life. Together, they began their journey across the burning wastelands. Caleb's horse carried them by day, but water was scarce, and every mile was a battle. Vultures circled overhead, reminding them how fragile life was. Yet with every hardship, they grew stronger, two souls from different worlds, united by survival. When bandits crossed their path, Caleb stood firm, his rifle steady, his courage reborn. When exhaustion threatened to break them, Ayoka shared stories of her people, stories of warriors who danced with death and still stood tall. She reminded him that the desert may test them, but it could not conquer the spirit of those who refused to bow. And slowly, something beyond survival grew between them: respect, trust, and a bond carved in fire and dust. At last, after days of struggle, they reached the edge of Ayoka's homeland. Warriors of her tribe rode out to meet them, shocked to see her alive. Tears filled the eyes of her mother, who believed her daughter lost forever. And as the tribe welcomed Caleb with honor, he realized that in saving one life, he had also saved his own spirit. For the first time since his brother's death, he felt whole. He had faced fear, faced the desert, and chosen courage over regret. And Ayoka, standing proud once more, knew that fate had tied her not to death, but to a destiny where courage and kindness walk hand in hand. And so, under the same burning desert sun that once promised death, a new story was written, a story of survival, of two souls colliding in the Wild West, of courage that turned despair into hope. Ayoka was no longer just a victim, she became a symbol of strength. Caleb was no longer just a cowboy with scars, he became a man reborn through courage. And together, they proved a truth as old as the desert itself: even in the harshest wilderness, the human spirit can rise, unbroken, unafraid, unstoppable. Sparkle's ending hook for your video. So remember this, my friends, sometimes life ties us to a tree of suffering, where hope seems lost and the wild beasts of despair circle close. But with courage, with faith, and sometimes with the unexpected kindness of a stranger, we can break free, and find destiny waiting on the other side.